So we're now seeing a list of Arab nations, with the exception of Russia, who will form this coalition to come against Israel in the last days. But in Ezekiel 38, it talks here in verse 2 about Magog. Gog in the land of Magog. Now, Gog would be the person. Magog would be the particular state that it's talking about. And according to biblical geography, Magog would have been that land mass north of the Caspian and Black Sea, which is Russia today. Then in verse 2, it says Meshech and Tubal. And down in verse 6, it says Gomer and Togarmah. When traveling in Turkey recently, I picked up an ancient Turkish map. And in biblical times, Turkey was actually divided into 4 parts: Meshech, Tubal, Gomer, and Togarmah. So we're now talking about Russia and Turkey. There in verse 5, it says Persia. Until 1936, there were 3 nations we know today that were known as Persia. Those 3 nations are Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. And then you continue on in verse 5, Ethiopia, or Cush in some translations. That would be Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan. And then in verse 5 again, it says here in my Bible, Libya, or maybe in another translation, Put. Well, that's modern-day Libya, Colonel Gaddafi. You have to coordinate this with Daniel chapter 11, verses 40 to 45. It talks about the king of the north. Earlier in chapter 11, you find out that is what we know as Syria today. And the king of the south would be Egypt today. And then going over into the book of Psalm, you go over the book of Psalms chapter 83, and it talks in Psalm 83 about a list of nations. It mentions here the Ishmaelites. Well, that's modern-day Saudi Arabia. And then in verse 5, it talks about Tyre. That's modern-day Lebanon. So we're now seeing a list of Arab nations, with the exception of Russia, who will form this coalition to come against Israel in the last days.